I want to talk about the character of this Prime Minister that is shown when he's either under real pressure, fake pressure, situational pressure, or how he makes a decision. It seems that something that is obvious, and you can think of it as a blessing or a curse all on your worldview, right? That he's not going to be a guy who ever wants to sort of reward those that create pressure. If he's going to come to a decision, he'll come to it on his own terms at his own time, very Howard-esque, but we live in a very different era where there's a whole lot more noise and more speed, and our sense of things happening yesterday, our ability to wait for anything. What have you gleaned out of his decision-making process and how he's responding to the politics of a situation like this?
I think that's exactly right. How you characterise Scott Morrison. He, there's been all this uproar in the media and in sections of the community and definitely on Twitter. And what he showed today is that he's not going to have a climate change emergency policy as a result of it. He's going to stick to his course, and they've got this technology roadmap coming out, and they're going to have practical measures. I think the danger of that reaction, though, from Scott Morrison of ignoring the noise, is that when there is a problem, he's slow to realise it's genuine, and that was the issue with him. His initial response to the bushfires, going to Hawaii, he didn't realise there was a problem, and the issue wasn't necessarily that
he's caught in one hell of a bind there. Anyone who's had that moment of job versus family.
Yeah, exactly. But it wasn't just that he took a holiday. It was that everyone was so worried, and that everyone craved that national leadership. And yes, he was slow to realise that it was real because he was just used to forgetting the pressure from the Twitterati.
So, Pauline, when you try to create pressure on, say, things like dairy, you've seen how the government responds. So now sort of knowing what it takes to win the Prime Minister over, or what level of things are, what actually pushes his buttons, what have you learnt about how to get a message through to the Prime Minister to either not necessarily do something he doesn't want to do, but to understand that something is a fair income problem, not just media noise?
What I find with the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is very decisive. He actually is very focused on what he wants to achieve and where he wants to go with it. I think his let down has been some of the ministers that he's appointed to it, and I think some of those ministers are with the National Party that have let him down, because he's got to play both sides of the fence. So it's just not the Liberal Party. He's also got to bring the National Party align with him, otherwise there won't be a coalition government. So I think it's the National Party ministers that have let him down. So it depends on how he actually handles this, because he's been ridiculed for these, like the bushfires, the drought and all the rest of it. But if you have a look at the ministers who have these portfolios, and especially Bridget McKenzie with the dairying and also now with the sports package, they have actually failed him and let him down. He's trying to pick up the pieces to maintain his credibility as leader of this nation. I think he's a strong person. I think he will push through with this. You've got to understand Scott Morrison, he's not a pushover by any means, and he'll keep going forward with all this.
Yeah, I mean, what are you seeing from afar? Is the other side of politics, and understand there's two ways you can look at him: as the political opponent that you slowly need to define, pull apart, and push into a corner to beat. But of his decision-making style, you've seen.
I think Shari said right. I mean, he stuffed up at the beginning, and I think I'd probably be a little bit more cynical. I think he's come out since he came back, he's made like a string of announcements. He's sort of like he's overcompensating because he mucked it up at first, and so he's throwing money. Suddenly, the deficit, Paul. The deficit's not that important. Okay, so he's been out there, but I think Sherry's right. He is not going to have an emergency climate package. As I said, the Twitterati are going to be broken-hearted if they think that he's for changing on his current direction on climate change. The Liberal Party have been through their pain. He's not going to revisit this. So I think he's because he is, people credit him genuinely and correctly he was a one-man band. He won the election. He has enormous authority in the party. But with enormous authority, you can also sometimes develop a bit of a tin ear, as you said, Shari. When real problems start to arrive, you can dismiss it a little bit more than if you've got a collective. So he's got to have good people around him who will pull him aside. Like Josh should have pulled him aside and said, mate, I'm sorry, I know you're with your family, you're going to have to come back a couple of days earlier than you were planning.
Well, that's what ended up happening.
With not having an emergency reaction to the climate change is he's going to blow the targets out of the water. Australia is going to beat the targets by such a degree that everyone on Twitter will be upset because they won't be able to be angry.
But this is what everyone ignores about it, right? We signed a deal for 2020. So at the end of it, they turn around and say, did you make it, did you not make it? We'll make it.
And what about
the next
New
one's
Zealand?
2030, but we're sort of having these conversations about, well, how will we get to maybe what... 2030 is when we judge whether we've made it or not, right?
But did you see New Zealand's going to have to rely on their carryover credits to meet their 2030
Surprise.
targets while lecturing everybody else?